I'm Jerry Ramsey. I attended Madras Union High School, as we called it then, from 1951 to 1955. My senior year, I was student body president and also editor of our newspaper, The White Buffalo. And I thought that after graduation, given the fun I'd had with newspaper work, I would go into journalism, but I discovered in college that I had an aversion to regular deadlines, so I reconsidered and instead became a teacher, got a doctorate in English, and taught for 35 years in English at the University of Rochester in New York. But I kept on writing and have written a number of books, including 6 books of poetry. My wife, Dorothy, grew up in Eastern Oregon too, near Pendleton, and we always agreed that if possible we would move back on retirement to Madras, and that's exactly what we did in the year 2000, and moved back to the family ranch north of Madras, and that's been a great joy. I've always thought, considering my time at Madras High School, that this was one of the really major pieces of good luck that I've had in my life for a whole variety of reasons. But a lot of things began to seem possible for me to do, and a lot of confidence began to emerge that I might be able to do some of them in high school. And I think that had a lot to do with the time that I went to school here in Madras and also with the people I was with. The time was that period in the early, middle, late 50s. A quiet time. Sometimes we're accused of being a silent generation or a complacent generation, but I don't know about that. We were kids growing up east of the mountains, so no doubt we didn't have access to all the temptations and the troubles and causes that people in urban areas were even then discovering, but we found our own causes and we pursued them. And we pursued them generally together because the student body was small. I think there were 300 kids in school when I graduated, and we had the largest graduating class ever in the history of the school, 60. And about 2/3 of them went on to college. I think about 15 or so actually graduated, which was an unusual record for that time. But the student body was, even then, before the coming of the Latino population, very diverse, namely Anglo and Indian. And about 30 to 40% of the student body when I was in school was from Warm Springs, from the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. And we got along very well. There was no racism that I was aware of. We played sports together and hung out together, and lifelong friendships came out of that. What I really want to emphasize here in these general remarks is the quality of the teachers. We had an extraordinary group of professional teaching all the subjects that we gave in those days. They were tough and caring and personable and real enablers of the students that they taught. And I just want to name the names of some of them. Bob Duke taught English and social studies. Jack McKethan, social studies. Bob Brewer was our beloved and only music teacher. Taught band, directed the band and the chorus, and was always putting on concerts which were well attended by the community. Ole Johnson was our basketball coach. Bill Wright was science teacher, also vice principal and counselor. Myrtis Lewis was a wonderful, flamboyant woman from Texas, a real pro among pros, whose nickname, and we called her by this to her face, was Teach. She was Teach Lewis. And it seemed that she could teach us anything that she wanted to teach us. She had a wide variety of subjects that she was certified in. Lino Christensen was the vocational ag teacher and the advisor to the FFA chapter, which at that time, and I'm glad to say, still is very popular here in Madras. It should be. He was a wonderful man and a real role model. And I guess I would also mention here, not last because least important, but last because most important to me, Howard Hillis. Howard Hillis taught English, but his real input to our life here in Madras High School was in journalism. He was the advisor to the White Buffalo, and he was a professional journalist himself. And as I say, my initial thought about going off to find a career was to be a journalist, but at least Howard, if I didn't do that, I kept on writing, which you gave me a lot of encouragement to do, as well as a lot of criticism. So I will be forever grateful to Howard Hillis. These teachers, as exemplary teachers, I think really shaped my own decision early on to become an educator. I thought this was an honorable life to follow because I had seen the success and the gratification of the teachers I'd had along the way. So I owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude. I want to tell a couple of stories in the time that I've got left here, briefly. One of them has to do, and other people will be telling the story better than I can, the story of the phenomenal basketball season that we had in 1954 and 55, when the first time in modern years, at least, Madras won the district championship in basketball and went to the state tournament. The team was an odd-looking, unlikely team, nobody over 6 feet tall. They didn't even look like basketball players, so people said when they saw them on the court. But as soon as they played, they knew that they were extremely gifted players, good shots. And they had, most of them, been playing together for 8 or 10 years. Most of them were from Warm Springs, Indians and white kids alike. And so they had all the moves, and they showed that off on the basketball court. And it looked like we were going to sweep through a very successful season when late in the fall, Coach Ole Johnson's little boy, Billy, just 4 or 5 years old as I recall, was diagnosed with acute leukemia. And after the first of the year, just before the district tournament, he passed away. And that cast a tremendous shadow over the school and the whole community. But at that point, the team resolved, I don't know if they ever got together and discussed this, they just resolved between them and amongst them that they were going to be determined to carry the season as far as they could. I have never seen determination quite like what that they showed. They swept through the district tournament, won all the games, went off to the state tournament in Eugene. And you have to understand that at that time, Madras, with a student body of 300, was competing with schools like Eugene High School, which probably had 2,500 or 3,000 students, and the schools in Portland. We were up against Benson Tech and so on. And we won our first 2 games handily and became the sort of the Cinderella darlings of the whole tournament. Very wonderful press that followed from that. Unhappily, at the end of the second game against Benson Tech, Roger Didock broke his ankle, and he was the playmaker for the team, and so we lost our last 2 games. But I've always believed very, very strongly that if that hadn't happened, we would have won the state basketball championship. We didn't, but we did the best we could. And I'll never forget, we came back on the bus, and we were met coming home to Madras at the Crooked River Bridge by a delegation from the community of 200 or 300 cars, all honking their horns and welcoming the team back to Madras. I was only a manager, I wasn't a basketball player, but I'll never forget that, and I don't think anybody involved will ever forget that. We had tremendous support from the community, and I think that still exists, although now Madras has a different level of competition. Still, I'd like to hope that the community does rally to support teams like that. In our case, they supported the whole school with always attendance at concerts and plays and whatever the school put up for public view. And they were supportive even when we were bad actors, I suspect. They were forgiving, I guess. And I think, if I can add this one point, that support in the community may have been partly based on the fact that all the teachers, I think all the teachers in the school, lived in or around Madras. Now, I don't know that there was a rule that required that then, but they just did. That's where they lived, so you would see your teachers not just in the classroom, but at church on Sundays, or in the supermarket, or wherever you went. Some of the younger teachers, to keep in shape, actually hired out during the summer to work on farms, so there was that connection. But the fact that they were there as residents, I think made a real difference in terms of the kind of presence they had in our lives and the kind of support that this community gave the school at large. The other thing I want to mention, the other story, maybe illustrates that kind of community support also. In 1954 and 55, before I became a senior and then on into my senior year, the student body decided that we were going to take on a project to raise money to bring lighting to the football field so we could play our games at night, as Prineville and Bandon, Redmond, and the other schools in the area were already doing. And we found out that we could get a really good deal from Pacific Power and Light. I think we could buy their poles and their lights almost at cost. I think the total budget was $10,000. It would be probably 10 times that much now, but that's what they offered us. So we organized ourselves, planned fundraising campaigns, met with a group of parents who promised to underwrite this endeavor when we went to the bank for a loan. So we trooped down to the bank, one of the banks here in town. I shall leave it nameless for reasons that will be obvious. We went to the bank with a delegation of parents, and we made our pitch to the local branch manager, and he listened to it and then smiled and said, well, that's an interesting proposal, boys and girls, but I don't think so. That's not the kind of thing that we do. We don't loan money to high school students. And we were dejected. There was a brief silence, and then the leading parent in the group spoke up and said, I think you might want to reconsider that position. I hope you will, because if you don't, if you refuse to loan money, given all the assurances we've given you, then I suspect that all the parents in this room will withdraw their asset from your bank right now, and other parents in the community will follow suit. Well, the bank manager was a very ruddy-faced man, but all the color drained from his face with that. And he said, well, I think we're going to have to talk about that. And a parent said, yeah, I think we should talk about it. And by the time we left that afternoon, the bank manager had contacted the Portland office, and they said, of course we'll guarantee that loan. And so we had the money, and we did go off and get the lights established on the field. And before that football season was over, we actually played our first game under lights. And I don't think the lights that are down now at the current high school are the same lights. I would assume they're much more advanced now than then, but we had the thrill of actually playing the first game under lights, which I think, for a wonder, we actually won. We didn't win very many football games, but at least we had lights when we were losing. But all of that, I could go on, but won't, because my time is up, and others will follow up with different aspects. But I think that's pretty much what I would like to say with this wonderful opportunity to tell my stories about Westside School, which again, I knew as Madras Union High School, and I hope in the course of these discussions, someone will be able to explain whatever happened to the union in Madras Union High School. We had our own union. We were a very unified student body in a community, but now I think it's Madras High School, which is fine, as long as they keep it Madras. Thank you very much.